Today is Thursday, June 5th, 2014, and this is the beginning of an interview with Mrs. Pauline Eberly at the Rutherford B. Hayes Presidential Center in Fremont, Ohio. Mrs. Eberly is 84 years old, having been born on September 16, 1929. My name is Julie Miley, Manuscripts Assistant at the Hayes Center, and I will be conducting this interview. Mrs. Eberly, can you state for the record what war and branch of service you served in?
The branch of service I was in was the Women's Army Corps, and I served during the Korean War.
Okay. Now, when you entered this area, were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
Okay. Now, were you able to be drafted? Was that a possibility for women at that time?
No, I didn't. They did not draft women at that time. They did during the Second World War, but they didn't. I don't know if they even did that. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure. But no, they didn't draft women then. It was all voluntary.
Okay. Where were you living at the time?
I was living in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay.
And that's where I went to school. Went from very young age till I graduated from high school.
Okay. Did you have any siblings at the time that were in the service?
Yeah, my brother was also in the service. He went in after I did. He was in the Army. He's 16 months younger than I am. Yes.
Aww.
Yeah, I'm the oldest, so there's four of us.
Okay.
But, and I have a sister that's 4 years younger than I am, and then we have this kid brother. When I was a senior in high school, my mother and dad had a baby boy, Bill Slotto, and he is now climbing son, but that's another whole story.
Aww. Okay. Was there a reason why you enlisted?
Well, like they, I don't know, some of the recruiters came to the high school suggesting that this was something you could do and to apply for it, and all the girls thought that would be exciting. People didn't have a lot of money back then. We didn't do a lot of traveling, and so I thought, gee, that sounds exciting. So 4 or 5 of us girls are all going to sign up. And they all chickened out, but I went on with it and decided to go in. I thought it would be fun.
Now, how old were you at the time?
I was 18.
And did you graduate before you went in?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
and I was working at a bank I was working at a bank and a newspaper when I was in the service, when I enlisted.
Okay. Where did you have to go once you enlisted?
We went to Detroit. I cannot remember where they interviewed us. It must have been a recruiting office. I can't remember. Oh my goodness gracious! And yeah, then we were given orders to report to Detroit. Okay. There was a bunch of other women that were there. Several of us, I think about maybe 10, that all went to Detroit, Michigan, to be sworn in the Army.
Okay. So do you recall your first days of your service? Did you guys do sort of like a boot camp basic training?
Oh yes.
Can you describe that a little bit?
Basic. We went through basic training, and it was, you didn't think you could do it, but you had the whole thing, a lot of marching, whether it was winter or whether it was cold, warm, rainy, or whatever. You had PT to do. I think some of the worst things for me was that I had to lift all the duffel bag and all the stuff that you had in it was something I wasn't used to, but you did it, and the boot training was, and we did a lot of marching. We lived in the barracks. We had to clean the barracks. We did all of that.
Where did you do your basic training at?
It was Camp Lee, which is now Fort Lee, Virginia.
Okay. How long was your basic training? Do you remember?
I think it was 8 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. 8 weeks, yeah. 8 weeks. And then I went on to quartermaster school. You were given different places to go, some of the girls went to some training for the hospitals, and some went for, I don't know what all of them were, but most of it was office work. So.
Okay. Did you have a choice of where you could go, or did they pretty much, that was your orders and that's what you had to do?
That was pretty much what they kind of interviewed a little bit, but you were more or less told where to go.
Okay. So where did you go after you completed your basic training?
Well, I stayed to go to quartermaster school, and that was another 8 weeks, and that was really, really schoolwork. I mean, you had work to do. You had to read maps and all that. Yeah, we did get, I was going to say, I was in the South. That was another experience, being in the South in Virginia. That was when the coloreds had their own drinking fountains in their own bathrooms. And I was not really, that was something I had never seen before.
That's exactly what your husband said. That sort of floored him. He said
did.
It was terrible.
It was not, it was something that was very foreign to me, and I didn't like it. But, I mean, things are different now. In fact, I think the first segregation of our WAC detachment was in Fort Lawton, and we had this big meeting. The commanding officer met with all of us and said we're going to have about 10 black girls in our detachment now, and didn't work out very well. Not because there was just a difference. We were not trained enough to. It was just a bad experience all the way. They weren't used to us living with them because they had their own, black girls and black men had their own detachments.
Okay. Okay. So where'd you go after your quartermaster school?
Got orders to go to Fort Lawton, Washington. That's way up in the northwest.
Okay. And what was your position there?
Let me see. I was mail clerk for a while, and I did the mail clerk, and then they needed a company clerk. That mail clerk lasted for about a couple months, and then they knew that I could type and do other things, and they needed a company clerk, and that was called cadre at that time. So I really spent a lot of time with the company doing morning reports and absenteeism. Who was absent, who was, whatever was happening, and had to put in a report every morning. You did all the typing of the letters. I don't know, it's just everything you did for an office work. But mostly it was to do with the WAC detachment, with all the personnel in our WAC detachment, and what their leaves were and what their, like I did some of the orders and things like that.
Okay. How long did you spend there?
At Fort Lawton,
Mm-hmm.
I spent 6 months there. So, about 2 years.
Okay. And at this time, there wasn't a war going on?
No, it happened during. I was at Fort Lawton. And then they extended our enlistments. I enlisted for 3 years, and it stayed for 3 years. But then President Truman, after the war started, and then we knew a lot of the fellows from we'd see them at the PX and all around, and at the tavern, at the post, and all that sort of stuff. And they start going overseas to Korea, and was very, very a big wake up call to all of us, and some of the things that they went through over there were awful. I mean, it was. You've ever seen MASH on TV, which you're pretty young, but anyway.
No, I watched it. I've watched it.
But MASH was not. It was from the letters and everything that we got from the guys. That we used to send them things over there that they needed and whatever that they didn't have, and it was just it. They were not prepared for that either, but that's the way it was.
Now, did you say? Was there a shift in your duties once the war started, or there was more regiment?
Yes, there was more regiment. I think they made sure that because we were on the West Coast, and we had to go through some more training to be quiet about what was going on and when the ships were going out and when they were coming back with the bodies. Actually, it changed a little. Yes, it became more. We still were free to go into town on leave, or have to pass or something, or go out if we wanted to. But it was different. It was a lot more regimented it was more, yeah,
Okay.
but not too bad. It really wasn't that bad.
Okay. Where did you go after Fort Lawton then?
Then I went to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, which was like night and day, and that was. And once again, I was company clerk for the detachment, and it was a real shock to me coming from Fort Lawton, Washington, which was very green and pretty, to going to have no green and dirt and the post Fort Huachuca was a mile in the air. It was
Really?
and it was very hard you had to learn how to breathe because the oxygen levels
thin.
were, you had to, that was another thing. But you got used to it. After about a week you were a bit, but it was a problem for a while. If you couldn't do a whole lot of training and running because you were out of breath. But your lungs got used to that, so. And it was just the food was terrible. We had buffalo running through the streets. The last buffalo, we had shake out our boots and shoes and shake out our beds because of all the bugs. And coming from Washington State and going to Arizona it was hard. It was different. Now that to me was a trial for me till I got used to it.
And you said there were rattlesnakes?
Oh, yes, you had to be very careful. There were at least 4 people killed by rattlesnake bites, and we were told what to do. But the thing is, you're not supposed to run. You're supposed to tourniquet yourself and all that. But it was not. It was not pleasant. Anyway, yes, there were at least 4 of the guys, not any of the girls, but 4 of the guys that were bitten and died.
Now, before you went to Arizona, you said you almost had the possibility of going over to Okinawa?
Yes.
Was a possibility for you?
It was a possibility. And actually, the Army would have sent me there if they really wanted me, but I think my commanding officer was going to go to Arizona, and she wanted me as her company clerk. I mean, she knew what she was getting, I guess. I mean, instead of trying with somebody new. So, and she said, would you want to go? And she was a very nice lady. She was really, I really enjoyed her. She was Coleman was her name, and she was a Jewish lady, and she was just a very nice lady, and we got along very well. And I even ran the detachment for about a month while she was gone. So that was a long time ago.
Now, you said some of your fellow workers that had gone over to Okinawa, that you said that they described it to you, and you were sort of, in hindsight, glad that you didn't go over there?
Oh, yes, very much so. A lot of them came back, and I had to make out passes for all these girls to get into town. And they came back, and they were a tough bunch of ladies after they come over there. And and I think some of them were drinkers after that. I don't know. I think Okinawa has changed like a lot of things have, but I think back then it's an island. There isn't. No. You didn't do much, but. And I just didn't like it. I just didn't like the way the ladies came back. I really didn't.
Okay. So after Fort Huachuca, how long were you there? Do you remember?
About a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was in, not quite a year, probably. 3. I was in over 3 years the whole time.
Okay.
And then I think the whole thing was I didn't like Arizona. That's
so it
why
seemed long.
I didn't like Arizona at all, and then and I didn't like the West, and I didn't realize when I was coming back home. You went on the train. Everything was done by train. Trains and buses is how we traveled then. But I can't. When we started out, when I left, when they started out, and it was very dusty and gray. I mean, everything was brown, and pretty soon as the train kept going through closer and closer, it kept getting greener and greener, and you didn't realize how really it just was a big difference, you know.
Okay. Did you guys have downtime? What did you guys do when you guys were able to go off by yourselves?
Well, in Fort Lawton, it was a cosmopolitan city. We went, believe it or not, we went to the symphony. And I was in a movie for a short movie about the wax, and with one of my friends, they used this for an advertisement for trying to believe it or not, I went to the movies and didn't know I was going to be up there, and somebody said and it was in the first live TV show where they gave blood. My girlfriend and I said, well, you want to go up and do this, sign us up, that's when she had to crawl around on the floor to get to the cameras, and so I mean we did all that. We went out a little bit. We didn't make very much money. I think what did I make a month? What the heck was it? Was I trying to think? It was as a recruit. I think it was $52 a month.
Oh my!
And you could get your 10 cents worth of cigarettes, but you had everything. I mean,
you didn't have very many expenses.
No,
at
right.
the time.
You had to buy your own soap, I think.
Were you able to keep in contact with your family during this time?
The first 2 weeks of basic training, you couldn't call home because they figured that would make you even more. You're homesick. I didn't realize I was homesick till I heard and I had a phone call. I didn't know I was homesick. You're so busy, and it's so different. And then I had one phone call, and I called my folks and told them that I was fine and we're doing okay, and talked to my mother. But I think we didn't call back and forth. You didn't do that. We didn't have the cell phones. We didn't have phones and we didn't have that kind of money. And we wrote letters, and that was about the most contact we had, was writing letters.
Okay. Any special memories that stick out in your mind? Any funny incidences? Anything?
Well, I think I really had a wonderful time at Fort Lawton. We did everything. We had, we pulled out for a lot of things. We did a lot of parading because we were the WACs, and then we were kind of an oddity, the women WAC detachment. And like I said, we would march down the streets of Seattle, and I was a cheerleader for the terrible football team we had, and we worked with at Easter. There's a lot of the officers lived on base in the houses, and they would have parties and things for their kids, and we would help with the kids. Actually, I babysat a couple times for them. Some of the officers. I mean, actually, what we did was we were still women. I mean, in fact, I think the government at that time, they were really trying to make us not. I think the WACs, or the women that were in the Army, kind of had a reputation, and they were trying to make us ladies. They tried to make us to have good posture, to dress well, and all the rest, and which was very nice. I mean, I think that was a good part of the government was doing that. I mean, maybe it was. I think it was good.
Okay.
In my estimation, it was. Because I was pretty young back then.
What rank were you able to achieve in this?
Well, that was a big hassle because wherever you were at, the highest rank I got was corporal. I was even doing first sergeant work at one time, but the girls, a lot of the girls worked on Pier 21, which is where they sent the men out to go to Korea and bring them back. They were considered in a different platoon. And so they got a raise, and a lot of them were sergeants, but back because I was cadre and living on Fort Lawton, I only attained corporal. They were very careful with what they were. It was hard for women to
be promoted,
to get a rank, to get a higher rank. And another thing, when I first went into basic training, the men really resented us women. We were making the same rate of pay as they were, and they had a lot more to do than we did. And I think that the resentment was definitely there. So, I mean, they didn't want to be helpful to us because we're here in the Army, do it yourself. So that was part of it. So it was different. It was different than it is now. It's just...
Okay. So was Fort Huachuca, was that your last stop before going home?
I went to work at Sandia Base after that. It was in New Mexico. I had a friend and before I went home, went to Sandia Base and worked at where was the 1st Atomic Squadron, but not very long. And then my mother wasn't feeling well, and so I came home and decided that my adventure was over with.
So you were discharged, or did you have to wait till you were discharged so you could go home, or did you?
No, I got discharged. You could get discharged after 3 years. Yeah.
Okay. And did you have the option of staying in if you had wanted to?
They wanted me to go to OCS and Officers Candidate School, and they gave me the books. But I think the problem was I hated Arizona so bad.
Bad taste in your mouth. Yeah. That was your last impression. So
yeah, that's terrible. That's terrible. Anyway, that was a lot of people love the West. It depended on the person.
Okay. So you came home. What'd you do when you came home? Did you go to school, or were you able to take advantage of the GI Bill? Did you have that option?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That I remember that I didn't have the option. I had started college before I left for the Army, but I don't think I was ready for college. Maybe I was never college material. Maybe that's why I didn't want to go OCS. There's a lot of studying to it, and I never did take. I don't know if I did. You could or not.
Okay.
I don't think so. But their jobs were around, so I just got a job.
Okay. And did you go back to? You came back to Fremont?
Yeah, Fremont.
You were in Fremont at the time.
Yeah, I never went back to Michigan.
Okay.
Because my dad was actually I was born in Cleveland, and then my dad had a job in Grand Rapids, so I was really grew up in Grand Rapids. So, but I had no relatives there.
All right. So you got a job, and when did you meet your husband?
Well, he was still in the Army. He was in the Army in Germany when I got home, and he lived around the corner from our house in Fremont, and he lived on Chestnut Street. He lived on Ohio Avenue, and in fact, and when he came home, he liked my sister.
Oh.
But she was practically engaged, so he took the second best thing. Is that what you want to hear on this thing? That's not part of the Army. But anyway, and I met my husband through, and he loved the Army a lot more than, I liked the Army and everything, but I don't know. I left it. I left to go on with my life, but my husband he's going to go to his Army reunion in Minnesota.
Yeah, he mentioned that.
Yes, and I won't go. I went to 2 of them, and they sit around and talk about tanks and things, and it's 900 miles one way, and I just don't want to go. Flying is even as difficult to get there. So
yeah. Okay. You had children then?
We have 2 children.
Okay.
They're all not for 7 years after we were married. We didn't have any kids, and we have a boy and a girl. They're adopted.
Okay.
That's it. I probably don't need to say that.
No, that's fine.
But anyway, great kids. Oh my gosh, great kids. We really lucked out with those kids, and I have 4 grandchildren now, and they've asked me about my Army, time, but I just, and it's their mother, so they're not too interested.
Okay. You still keep in contact with anybody from that time?
I did for a while with Loretta Philly, and then she got married, and I was in her wedding to Bob Waltersack. And he went to visit. They came back and saw us a couple times, and they were married, and they had a daughter, and we didn't have any kids when I first. Then we went and saw them down in Florida, And then we kind of lost track. And then I don't even know, we wrote for a long time, and then we just the one thing about the Army is that when you go like through basic training, quartermaster school, and all that training, and then they move you, and it's one of the saddest things. You make all these friends, and you think you're going to be friends forever, and you're really not, because your lives go off in different. You lose track of them. There's too many. But it is kind of the Army can be one of the saddest things in the world, because you have to say goodbye so much. And I think it's worse for men because they're in battle. And they
have that bond.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Well, looking back at it, would you do it again? Do you think of it as a positive experience?
Yes, I do. I do. I got to see a lot of things that I never would have. Did a lot of things, and had my 15 minutes of fame. And oh yeah, would I want my daughter to go into it? My son, our son, we have a son and a daughter. Our son could have gone to West Point. He did not want to go to West Point. He didn't like somebody telling him what to do. And he went to college and he's got his master's and all that, and he's a good family man. But it's not for everybody, evidently. It just isn't. And my daughter, would I want my daughter to do it? It might have done her some good. Except she's a good wife and mother, so I can't complain.
Good.
But if she had wanted to go, I would have supported her.
Good. Do you belong to any military organizations today?
Yes, I was the first woman officer for the American Legion here in Fremont. I was their adjutant for several years. But I was still fighting. The place is full of old men, and they remember that was back then for World War II. And they liked me because I was doing the work and the secretarial work, which what the adjutant was, but they didn't like a woman being there. Some of them didn't, anyway. And yes, I belong to the VFW auxiliary. I didn't go overseas, although I told everybody I was overseas in Fort Huachuca. And I belong to the auxiliary and of the VFW, and I belong to they have a museum. I went back to Fort Lee. What a change from when I went there. Oh, it was dirt roads and everything back then, and now they have Walmart and everything on the post. And
wow.
It was so changed. And there's that women's museum that I belong to, Women's Army Museum, that I went through, and I contribute to that.
Okay.
So I think that's probably and I was in the color guard for a while. Whenever we had some women that passed away that were in the service, so I would go to be in the color guard for them. But seeing how as I'm 84 years old, I decided I'm too old to do something. So.
Yeah, scaling back a bit, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That's all right. Well, anything I didn't ask that you want to add? Anything you can think of?
It was a part of my life, and it enriched my life being in the Army, and I'm glad I did it. But it's past, and you have to, my family is the thing that we do now. So.
Oh, that's a good statement. Oh, I think that's a good place to stop.
Okay.
Sound good.